And it goes a little something like
I'll keep love you warm all summer, and after fall, I'll keep you
Hello, all.
warm.
So, this is the second episode of our Sumi Huddle. This is a creative podcast series produced by me and Umay there. And we did this series because we had so many nice, inspiring individuals in our friends, in our network, and we wanted to showcase the work that they do that we admire and create a space for them to feel comfortable sharing their insights, stories, and experiences in the impact circles. And today we have with us the inspiring Laura de Franchis. She has over 20 years of experience working with different NGOs, the UN, and various other international organizations. And Laura has dedicated her career to driving systemic change. Not only I think she is an incredible social impact leader, but I honestly think she is a joy to speak with. She always brings some motivating energy that I think creates a ripple effect of positive action. And today we'd like to dive into her work, which we believe is at the intersection of creativity and purpose, and explore her personal journey and the challenges she's overcome and how she hopes to continue to inspire others and herself to take action for meaningful change. And hey, hello, Laura. As
Hi,
I
Sue.
said, I think that we're really excited to have you over because I think your work really is at the intersection of creativity of purpose, which we value and are very interested about. What I mean by that is that I think you have this unique position where you use entrepreneurship as a vehicle to sort of drive meaningful change. And since I think this is a very interesting intersection to be at, I'm curious about what inspired you about taking this path, and were there any pivotal moments or inspiring moments that shaped your mission or shifted your perspectives along your path, basically?
Well, first of all, thank you, Sue, and thank you, Umay, for having me today, for inviting me. I'm very honored. Yeah, regarding this first question, I guess entrepreneurship and creativity, yeah, I think the advantage, and then I'll get into maybe a bit more my background, but I think what entrepreneurship and the status that I have now, which is independent entrepreneur and social entrepreneur, is I get to make my own decisions, right? And so for me, and to put in whatever ingredients I want into my work and to decide for myself if a job or another or an event or maybe volunteering even for something, if it makes sense to me, if I align with it, if it aligns with my purpose, and I can just do it or I can drop it, which I think is very empowering.
Yeah.
So now where does that come from? I mean, you mentioned it already, Sue. I've had a very long career. I still feel very young, but I've traveled a lot. I've done a lot of work. I started with the NGO sector in the environmental fields, and that felt like the right thing to do at the time. I was like a young agronomist. I studied soil and water conservation, and I loved traveling. I wanted to, see the world and save the planet. So that was the thing to do at the time. But then after a while, I was like, oh, the projects I was working on, I didn't really see the results or the impact. And so then I decided, okay, well, let's try something else. So I had a good paying job in the south of France. And I decided, okay, let's volunteer for the Red Cross. And I did. And then I didn't end up working for the Red Cross, but I ended up working for Action Against Hunger. So basically, I wanted to be a humanitarian. And yeah, and I traveled the world. And then I was like, okay, but this is not making enough difference, no? So again, this thing with the difference and the results, like what is it? What's the impact? I was, helping people, but I didn't really see the big picture. And I had the opportunity to work for the United Nations. And I was like, yeah, that sounds like it should change the world. So I went with that one for like a long time, 15 years. I worked for the World Food Program and for the International Labour Organization. And then what happened was, I guess, in a way, we could say two things. One, I felt maybe that I was disengaging from my own alignment. I was in Thailand. I think that's when I first felt it. I was like, hey, wait, we're in an expat bubble. I was no longer learning the language as I used to. Every time we went to a new country, we'd learn the language. And I was like, wait, there's something wrong here. I'm turning into those people, I'm becoming one of them. So there's this little voice in me saying, you need to leave. But then there was another voice saying, well, this is a good job, you have status, you have money. So I was staying for the wrong reasons. And then COVID basically pushed me out of the UN in a way. And I won't go into the details of why, but basically I ended up like out of a job. And I was like, okay, so now's the time. And I was like, okay, I'm free. And the feeling was amazing. I was like, I'm free, I'm free. I have a lot of resources because I'd accumulated, what people do sometimes. I had accumulated a lot of resources. So I was free. I was free to do what I wanted to. So that was a big aha moment for me. And then I had a big bada boom moment because there was something I had gone through when I was working with the United Nations. When I started in Pakistan, there had been a suicide attack on the office, and I was there. And basically, what hit me, I think 14 years later, was the whole thing, was the whole event. And that was I developed post-traumatic stress disorder. So at the height of my energy, I was like, yay, and then like, and that was like, for me, really a difficult moment. And also, questioning myself, a lot of doubt came in. And yeah, so I fortunately got treatment. And so now I'm kind of like building myself out from, whatever I've experienced before, but really trying to be careful to staying true, because I realized that I don't know if, this trauma kind of covered up a lot of stuff. So now I'm really trying to stay true to myself, to be careful with what I'm doing. And I have a lot of, I don't know, a long story. So maybe that's a bit too long. You tell me if you.
No, it wasn't long at all. It actually really resonated with me because I mean I'm not an incredibly deep believer like my mom or or my grandmom, but I think I honestly at this sort of age I'm starting to see that sometimes life really shows you the way that you should be flowing towards. You sort of go to a direction thinking that this is the right thing for me and this is the right thing that I need to be doing. And then you sort of something happens in your life and you realize that you hadn't really settled in the most genuine path for yourself. And that I really believe in that. So it was very nice and refreshing to hear it from you as well.
Yeah, I mean, thank you for sharing that. That was really vulnerable. And it's not really easy to talk about, especially for people doing, social impact focused work. We always tend to, stay positive and focus on the good outcomes, but there are, of course, overwhelming parts as well. Which brings me to my next question about vulnerability. I wanted to ask you about like the human side of your journey, including the challenges and the mistakes. And you mentioned some of those events in Pakistan. Was there any other moment that in your career made you feel your human side of things? I mean, I think the one you told was one of them, but maybe specifically in your like pre era where you are this wondering entrepreneurship. Is this something you always like keep with you after everything you've been through, being vulnerable and focusing on the human side?
Yeah, I think for me, one of the lessons I've learned in life, is you can inspire people from the bottom. So basically saying, So maybe just going back to the Pakistan thing, saying I went through that. I'm very vulnerable. I can't take because I had to stop work altogether, like for a long period of time. Being able to open up about that, I think inspired other people to talk about their things. And we were like, oh, but and it was surprising actually what came out of sharing. Whereas my experience of that event was one of deep shame because I had survived it and I had nothing, there was nothing wrong with me. People died and I had done nothing. I just stood there and watched and I did nothing. And that was a big sense of shame. And then sharing that actually, it creates a sense of connection with other people who might have gone through different things, but who connect, who understand that feeling. So yeah, I think that thing of sharing that you're vulnerable, that you're not perfect, and sharing your mistakes. I think that makes a big difference for me, at least in terms of my learning. And maybe you were asking about something else. I mean, recently in my work, so now I have my own company. I work a lot with international organizations. My purpose is really like social justice. And I had like this huge contract that I was like, yay, I'm in. I can totally do this. But then, what happened, like there were some budget cuts and I got one like that hit me so hard. I had no idea that it was coming because it was on an existing project that I was working on. And I was like, hey, you guys, you can't do that to me. I mean, to me? So, so that completely put everything I was back to square one in terms of building my company. I'm like, I need to find something. Otherwise I won't make the year, right? So I'm still looking. But now what I'm doing is I'm yet again reinventing myself and looking for opportunities to do things and connecting, with people like you, taking the time to look around, to connect and to say, okay, this clearly didn't work. I should not put my eggs in the international organization basket, or at least I need to put some eggs elsewhere. And that's a very exciting opportunity for me. And as I said, I think I'm very lucky because I did accumulate a lot of resources in the past. So I do have that freedom of saying, okay, I can hold on a little bit longer.
Yeah.
Did I answer your question?
Yes, but
Okay.
don't worry because it was a confusing question.
Oh.
I was like, did it went through? But I'm glad you mentioned like budget cuts, which I think is a big part of social work in general in every country. Sometimes we have to deal with that. And like I said before, social work also has other challenges in itself. But how did you bounce back, like after doing social impact focused work all your career and having these vulnerable moments or these challenges? How do you stay motivated? I know it's a cliche question and it's not. I know I hate like I wake up at 6 a.m. and have my breakfast and I'm motivated all the time. I know it doesn't work like that. So like, do you have any tips or advice on this?
Also add to this because I'm also very curious about this.
Mhm.
I also sort of think we try to do some work in social impact, especially working with social impact organizations, helping their communication. And sometimes, you get very involved with the issues that they are raising and that they are trying to activate about. And it is very hard to sort of insulate yourself from that too. So not only like your own professional journey, but I think that's also a burden as well. And that sort of hinders your motivation as well. Sometimes you look at it and like, why am I doing this for? Like everything's going to shit. What am I doing this for? So it's like I'm also curious about your if you have a tips and tricks about how to, not to fall into despair, basically.
Yeah, I mean, the world is going to shit, to be honest. But of course, I really relate to what you're saying, no? Like there's the despair, and I think there's another side to it that is the denial, right? So I'm hearing lots of people now telling me like, I don't want to listen to the news anymore because it's too depressing. So they're basically closing off, and I mean, there's other people who are actively denying, which is actually in the end, in terms of what it does, in terms of action, it's the same, no? Despair, denial, same result. Yeah, you might say, oh, I'm this, some people feel very like righteous because they're in despair and they're like, oh, it's not, but in terms of results, it's not much better than to seeing, nah, I actually had a quote that if you do fall into despair, it's okay. I mean, it's okay to fall into despair. I mean, times are tough. The thing is, with despair, it's a bit of a, how do you call it? As I said, with the denial, it's an emotion that really doesn't get you to action, right? But so the quote I wanted to give you, I'm going to give it to you now because I was like, I'm going to build up I'm just going to give it to you. It's William the Taciturn, so Willem van Oranje for the Dutch people. And so the quote is in French, but I have it translated, and it means, it is not necessary to hope in order to act, nor to succeed in order to persevere.
That's
Yeah. So that is really, I think, even if you do fall into despair, just you can still act, right? Now, it is difficult to act when you're in despair. So another opportunity, if you can, another thing to do is really stubborn optimism. Being stubbornly optimistic. It's a choice. Yeah. So you're like, and that's the choice I try to make when I can, really to say, okay, I have to be optimistic. Yeah. Because optimism gives me energy to act. So I have to do whatever I can. So that's my number one tip. Look for the silver lining. I'm not the best example. I mean, I have a lot of privileges, so my work is really easy. Yeah, I'm in a privileged position. I've always been. I still am. I'm very aware of that, right? And that's also one of my motivators of, we should really change the system because it's not normal that somebody like me has so many resources and facilities, and that's just the way it is. Go for staying optimistic. And I think there's a podcast on that on the climate part, for example, that's called Outrage and Optimism, which is illustrating that fact. So there's two emotions, right? There's the rage. Rage is also a very activating emotion. When you're enraged, you tend to, not just sit down and the optimism is a very activating emotion. So these are the two that you can go with. And if you are, so despair is not so great. So, but we said you can still get to action if you're in despair. But if you can activate the rage rather than the despair, then go for that one. And be enraged, right? Because a rage is what you feel when there is injustice. So it's good. So you can go for that. And then the optimism makes you see, the way forward. This is what I want instead of what is now, right?
Yeah. I love that you are bringing these like different words together, being stubborn yet optimistic and enraged, but using that as a useful outlet. And yeah, I'm gonna note this down. I'm gonna post it and just like stick it on my wall.
Yeah, I also this was I think my first introduction to you, propensity to use rage for positive action, because I relate to that. I have this, like, one of my favorite quotes is Agnes Varda, I think her name is a feminist filmmaker. She says, "I tried to be a joyful feminist, but I was very angry." That really relates to me. Like, yes, there's so much that we can do with joy, But I do believe that anger is a very moving sort of feeling as well. I think it's a very also human reaction to be angry at what's going on around us. So it's not necessarily, I think it just has been given a bad name, rage and anger, as if they are like negative emotions, which sort of actually is a really good segue to my next question, because I wanted to ask you, I mean, a lot is going on in the world, but is there anything currently that personally or professionally or general world-wise, something specific that you're very fired up about, like that you're very angry about, something that really drives you to action these days? It can even be like a neighborhood brawl or something that you really like, you're passionate about these days.
I think the genocide definitely is something that I'm absolutely enraged about. I haven't figured out really how to act on that, other than, making my voice heard on the topic, but that doesn't feel like it's enough. Now, where I do think I have maybe more capacity to act. I mean, the world, as we said, is going to shit. Sorry for using the bad word. I hope you don't have to delete it. Probably not. There's so many things, no, that to be enraged. In a way, you can, flip it and say there's so much we can do, right? And I think so. My topics, and it's not because I think they're the most. I mean, they're the most. They're the closest, I think, to my purpose. But I have, it's all around social justice, right, or social injustice. So I have a lot. I'm very enraged about what's being done on everything that has to do with the climate, because I'm very passionate about climate justice and how it affects us differently and how that is unfair. And again, living in the Netherlands, I mean, this is a utopian bubble, if you want, like the way things are going. But climate justice, I think, is a big one for me. Poverty in general, and social injustice. Yeah.
I think the question you answered very brilliantly is what fired you up. And I think, yeah, three topics, and they're interconnected too. So it
Absolutely.
makes sense. Yeah, once you start getting angry about something, you see that there's so much that you can do and you need to take action for, I think.
Yeah, you can't solve social injustice without solving climate justice, or having that, because one, it just exacerbates the other. So they are completely interconnected.
Yeah.
And there's other issues that are on top of that, discrimination, all those things. Anyway, so it's a complex thing.
Please, I think
But let's not despair.
yeah, we're just getting angry here. We're not
Just
going.
let's get angry. I do want to say something about rage, though. I think just maybe to your point, so that rage is something that is sometimes that's being portrayed wrong, but it is the way that the rage is expressed that can be very wrong. Yeah, but the emotion,
Yeah.
it can absolutely be there, but it's the way you express it. So I just want to make sure that I'm not perceived as advocating for violence. I'm just saying that rage is an emotion, something that gets you in motion that you can use.
Yeah.
But please don't make me say that we need violence. Or at least, please, people who listen, don't misunderstand what I'm saying. It's an emotion that you have to, that has energy that you can use.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, the world makes us a whole lot of different feelings, and we all have different coping mechanisms, and I would never ever advocate for one of them to be violence, obviously. I think taking action has, I always sort of think the work that we do, and even like personally, going to protests, trying to do your best to be a responsible human being is sort of a selfish act because it makes me feel good to take action. So it's just what you do with what you feel, I think, is the most important. And I want to also ask you, because we have talked about your general view of what's going on and what your work, but I want to ask you about what you said, you are at a new era right now, a point of transition, so to say. What's next for you, and where do you think if we can find you next? What do you want to do next? How can people know about you next?
So if you want to be in touch with me, LinkedIn is probably the best way to reach out. So Laura de Franchis, that you spell Franchis. That's my LinkedIn, and that really is the place to go. Otherwise, I also have a website, etc. But I think most in terms of my next steps, as I said, I'm trying to reinvent and to figure out what's needed, what I can do, what I love to do, and what I'm good at, right? So that's maybe you're familiar with the Ikigai, but those are like the four circles of the Ikigai, and finding the center, right? So I think I'm creative. I like to talk with people. I like to connect. So basically, really what I'm trying to do these days is to facilitate conversations towards action, right? I think that's also where we met. And so the next events that I'm actually working on, there's going to be one in The Hague, where maybe, people, if they are in the Netherlands, can show up too. I don't have the exact dates, but it's connected to the Hague Road to Summit. That's what it is. Yeah, so I'm organizing an event, and well, the title for now is in Dutch, but if I translate it, it's basically climate workshop, what works and what's next, or what now. And so there, the idea is really basically to look at what works. So I have a background in evidence building. I don't think I mentioned that, but anyway, so looking at what evidence do we have of system change, and how can we replicate it? How can that work? So facilitating conversations and contacts between people, organizations. So that's one. And then there's another event that I'll be going to that's in Belgium, and that's in May. And it's called the Freedom from Slavery Europe Regional Forum. And I'll be facilitating, moderating panels and workshops there as well. I didn't mention, I think, that I was also very much involved in what we call fundamental principles and rights at work, but that's basically also, it includes slavery. So that's one of the topics. And yeah, basically, what am I doing now? I'm really putting myself out there. It's a bit scary. I mean, this podcast for me is also something new, but yeah, I think we need to connect. Yeah. So these events and this facilitation, I think that's really what I'm looking for. What can I help with? So my background is in finding what works, right? So it's in identifying what we call maybe promising practices, or for organizations, like what is it really that we're aiming for? What does success look like for the system, right? Not just like, I'm not talking, don't come to me if you need a business model. I would not be able to help you with that, but I can help you if you really want to contribute, positively to the system, change the system, etc. Then we can, work together to find the path. So finding the strategy, looking at what evidence do you need to get there, and all of that in favor of social justice.
That sounds exciting and tiring, but also
Does it? Is that a good pitch? I don't know. Maybe I need to look at it.
I mean, it worked on me for example.
It's like an elevator pitch. I think it's good.
Yeah, okay. I'll listen to the podcast and try to write it down to remember it.
I mean, hopefully, with with the connections we have in the Netherlands and the States and Turkey, somebody will find us useful, somehow connect to you or to us. That's why we're doing this.
Yeah, and I really understand why you're doing this for inspiration, etc. I'm very honored that you picked me for one of these, but yeah, no, that's definitely something that we need to do. We need to inspire people. We need to enrage people a little bit. We need to build community. Yeah, and it's not just about building community with the us versus them, and on that one, I think it's very important to say that it's not us versus them. There's this narrative, no, that's
Yeah.
coming around, and on any topic you can have that narrative.
Yeah.
And so for me, it's really about reaching out to everyone and to have conversations, to have difficult conversations. And I think probably the most important thing to do in those situations is to listen.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's
Yeah, that
really, I
makes
think, I don't want to say a problem, but maybe a setback for
challenge maybe.
social impact community or people who work in this field, because from what I see from our clients too, it's they either don't have the time to be out there spreading the word, or they're putting out content, going live and doing all of this. They either don't have the time, or they're just not used to be out there and show their faces. So I'm glad you're starting doing that, and we get to be a part of it.
See how your podcast goes. Maybe I'll start my own podcast as well. So maybe you'll be able to tell me, how that goes.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, we're gathering experience on this. So it's good.
Yeah.
Very, very nice to have you. We had a wonderful conversation. I was actually listening, like really, like it wasn't because sometimes I'm thinking about my next question, like what am I gonna say? But I was like really, really looking forward to what you were going to say for the answers. So it was really nice to talk with you.
Oh, wow. Thank you. It was, I don't know. I felt
You're welcome.
awkward talking about myself, but let's see. I'm not sure I want to listen to it.
It's very lovely.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Have a nice rest of your day.
Yeah, you too. Thanks. Bye.